Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Ronald Tol, and I'm the Head of Standards and Regulations for Europe, Middle East, Turkey, Africa, and Pakistan at Signify, the world leader in lighting. Today's presenter in Signify's Lighting Academy is Ourania Georgoutsakou of Lighting Europe. Before handing over to Ourania, I will spend a few minutes giving some background to stress the importance of the topic of her presentation. I'll go to this slide. So, at Signify, we provide high-quality, energy-efficient lighting products, systems, and services. We are the #1 in connected LED and conventional lighting. And with 35,000 people in 70 countries, we realized sales of €7.5 billion, and we achieved that with our operations globally being 100% carbon neutral. Our world is changing though, and we see three major trends. First, we have more and more people on the planet who are living more and more in an urban environment, which leads to more demand for lighting. Second, there is a limit to the natural resources that are available to people on the planet. This requires more energy efficient lighting. And finally, digitization allows lighting to become more connected, thus enabling smarter lighting solutions. Our energy efficient smart lighting solutions help governments reduce their energy use and carbon footprint for a more sustainable environment. They also enable municipalities to make their cities more safe, livable, and sustainable, and they improve people's productivity and well-being. To show the impact of energy efficient lighting, we simulated the switch of LED of all light points in the 27 countries of the EU, and found that that could save €65.1 billion annually and reduce emissions by 50.9 million tons of CO2. Now, to be able to provide these sustainable lighting solutions, systems, and services to our customers, it is important that we have a so-called level playing field. In other words, that the conditions to compete are fair for everyone. All have to adhere to the same rules, that is, standards and regulations. We therefore, as Signify, participate in standardization development organizations, trade associations, and industry consortia. A selection of these can be seen on the slide, to advocate simple rules that are easy to enforce. Lighting Europe is the trade association representing the lighting industry in Europe. And it's therefore my pleasure to introduce you to Ourania Georgoutsakou, who is the Secretary General of Lighting Europe since April 2017. Her role is to represent Europe's lighting industry in the Brussels political arena, to liaise with industry executives, and to manage the association's operation. Ourania has 20 years of experience advocating for membership associations, previously working as a Director of Public Policy in Europe for SEMI, and as a Senior Policy Coordinator with the Assembly of European Regions in Strasbourg and Brussels. Ourania, the floor is yours to present your presentation, and I'll hand over the controls.
Thank you very much, Ronald, and to everyone in Signify for having me here today, and I wish you all a good day wherever you are. It's my pleasure to be here to give some insights on what I do as a day job here in Brussels. Sunny Brussels for the moment, but if the lighting changes, please know that the sun has come and we're back to our usual rain again. First, my thanks to Ronald for having taken the courage to pronounce my last name beautifully. It is exactly that. And for those of you who would like the Greek experience, in Greek, I'm called Ourania Georgoutsakou. And that's complicated also for the Greeks, so everybody calls me Rania, and feel free to do so here also. I'd like to talk to you today about how EU rulemaking works, why it's relevant to the lighting industry, how it impacts our business, our products, our strategies, and to also discuss how organizations like Lighting Europe and how people working across the lighting value chain can contribute to making rules better and to making sure that the European market is all about quality compliant lighting, and how we can work together to export these ideas of harmonization and global understanding of what is good lighting or better lighting or good rules across different regions and markets in the world. First, to tell you who I work for. So Lighting Europe is the voice of the lighting industry here in Europe. based in Brussels. Like I said, we have 31 members, which represent over 1,000 companies. That's about 100,000 jobs here in Europe and 21 billion annual turnover. Our members are a mix of companies, lighting manufacturers, so the companies across the different applications and across different markets as well. So you will see we have all kinds of different companies, lamps, luminaires, components, indoor, outdoor, all kinds of applications, and also includes national trade associations that represent lighting manufacturers in different countries across Europe, not just the EU. Our membership includes, it used to include Norway until earlier this year, but includes still today the UK, Turkey as well. So really the wider Europe. We have set out a vision in Lighting Europe as an industry about how we can deliver the value of lighting and grow the industry, but also grow the value for people and the environment. And it was set out back in 2016. You see it's a vision for 2025, and I can already confirm to you today that one of the big priorities for this year in Lighting Europe is to review and revise that vision, but for a longer time perspective. But basically what we see is that as lighting, as an industry, we have largely managed through LEDification. We've got that under our belts quite confidently here in Europe, I would say. That has significant benefits for the quality of the sustainability that we can offer in terms of energy savings. The next big opportunities that we see as an industry are rollout of intelligent lighting systems, and of course, delivering human-centric lighting to people. And the way to get there is to make sure that we have a healthy regulatory environment, so a clear framework that everybody can understand, apply, and operate within. This vision translates into the priorities for Lighting Europe as an association. So if I summarize what we stand for here in Brussels and what we advocate in our meetings with other trade associations, with environmental NGOs, with elected people in the European Parliament or the officers of the European Commission. We tell them what we want is sound, simple rules that everybody can easily understand, apply, and enforce. We want to deliver the value of lighting, so we want policies and frameworks that accelerate and support the rollout of smart lighting systems and human-centric lighting. We are here as a trade association to support companies to manage circular economy and implement circular economy and sustainability thinking in their companies and in their products, and also to work with others here in Brussels to shape an environment that delivers on sustainability but still safeguards and promotes the value of lighting. And finally, we stand for better enforcement. We can write all the rules we want in life, but if there's no one there to check that they're being applied correctly and to make sure that non-compliant products and non-compliant actors are swiftly removed from the market, then there's really no point to the exercise. If I try to summarize what we do in Lighting Europe, I'm here with a team of 6 people in Brussels, right behind the European Commission and about 5 minutes walk from the European Parliament. We help our members navigate what is, quite frankly, a very complex environment. It's a lot of different policies, a lot of different political parties, a lot of different nationalities that all come together from across Europe in Brussels to shape a common set of rules and a common set of policies and objectives for everyone. So we act as someone who helps companies navigate that environment and understand what's important to them and what you need to do in order to comply. And the other thing we do is we act as the liaison between the industry and the regulator. So the team here is primarily advocacy experts, policy making or law graduates primarily. Our members have the technical expertise to help deliver quality, technical justifications about our recommendations. And in Lighting Europe, the team and I act as middlemen to make sure that these two very different kinds of people communicate. And that's important because in life, someone will always make a rule that impacts you, and no politician can be expected to know everything about lighting, dishwashers, cars, and you name it. So that this balance and this interaction, this very healthy, I think, interaction here in Brussels, makes sure that we create legislation that balances all views and all objectives. So enough about me. Here's what I want to talk about here today. If you ask us here in Lighting Europe, what do you think are the biggest opportunities and possibly, quite possibly, the biggest challenges for the industry? I think I would say that the biggest drivers here over the next couple of years will remain sustainability and digital policies. Those are the two big words coming out of the EU for the past few years, and they are here to stay for a while still, I think. And from that perspective, the lighting industry is very well placed because, like I said, we've done the LEDs. We are the poster children for energy savings. We can, just by the switch to LED technology, deliver impressive savings, more so when we switch to smart lighting systems. And we've got the promise and the potential to also deliver quality lighting. So as an industry, we are very much well placed to deliver on those two key trends and to benefit from those two key trends that drive policy and rules here in Brussels today. The big European policy is called the European Green Deal. It was published in December 2019 in the first 100 days of the new European Commission, the new executive body of the European Union at the time. And the target there was to make the EU climate neutral by 2050. Protecting human life, animals and plants, cutting pollution, helping companies focus their attention and their resources on becoming world leaders for clean products and technologies and making sure that everybody can keep up. So making available the tools, the financing, the resources so that everybody can follow in this transition. And a lot of people had said from the very beginning, oh, that this is just a green policy, and we all all politicians say these things, and do they really mean it? And where's the real growth plan, Ourania? Where's the industrial plan for Europe? This is the growth strategy for Europe. And we have held consistently to the EU Green Deal as a policy and as a drive through COVID, through the war in Ukraine and the impact it has had on our markets and on our energy availability. And the Commission leaders repeat that this is what we want to do. This is how we see that we can grow the economy of Europe and deliver prosperity for people. So the EU Green Deal is really the way that we plan to reinforce Europe's economy and maintain a competitive edge. It's not just a sustainability policy. So with that in mind, let's take a bit of a deep dive into a couple of aspects of the EU Green Deal. I'm going to talk primarily here today about energy savings, renovation, and about sustainability. So if we start with the savings and the renovation first, there is a big drive to deliver energy savings here in Europe. First of all, because of the objective to be climate neutral by 2030. And then that was only accentuated with the war in Ukraine and the need to make immediate, urgent savings in energy use, reduce our energy use here. So you will see we have been seeing across the board over the past few years, various initiatives to drive that change. We have a big plan called Renovate Europe, which is all about renovating Europe's building stock, changing the legislation to accelerate renovation of these buildings and then really move to new technologies that will generate the savings that are needed. One of those is the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive that I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. The policy is complemented by financing. So the EU has made available financing to support member states during COVID. If you remember back in the days of lockdown where we said, okay, we need to accelerate in terms of achieving our climate ambitions. Everyone's at home. Let's start renovating and let's incentivize renovations. So there was money available at EU, at national level, to incentivize buildings owners to change and to upgrade to more energy saving systems. And part of the work we did in Lighting Europe is to make sure that those programs and those instruments also incentivize the renovation of lighting. And of course, there were various investments to reduce our dependency on external energy sources, which were becoming hard to get by. Now, lighting is quite an easy story because, in fact, my work was relatively easy. I didn't have to convince anybody of the savings of LED lighting. The EU already knows. It's consistently made studies to capture, to quantify the energy savings potential and the cost saving potential of LED light sources. They did some estimates for the impact of the new eco-design rules for light sources and saw that there were immediate savings both in energy and in terms of money for consumers. And the same calculation was true for the lighting systems with controls. So they also understand that by going through a lighting system approach, you can make even more significant energy savings. So the data is there. It's not even mine. We don't have to make it up as an industry. The EU and its research bodies have already come up with those numbers to justify the benefits of switching to better lighting. And part of the Renovation Wave Initiative was buildings, which are there for about 40% of energy consumed. So the EU Renovation Wave set out ambitious objectives to reduce emissions by at least 55% in 2030 and renovate 35 million buildings deemed to be inefficient by 2030. So really strong ambitions which drive national plans and national financing to incentivize and support people to then renovate their buildings. In Lighting Europe, we try to influence also the legislation for the energy performance of buildings to make sure that in the next version, now that it's being revised, there's a clear mandate for using automatic lighting controls, for making the smart readiness indicator a mandatory feature, so it should not just be voluntary. Every building should have an indication of how smart ready it is and actually how smart it really is, not just its potential, but its actual smartness levels. We asked for including inspections, including the lighting system design process, and making sure overall that those requirements then in that EU legislation can be trickled down and found in national renovation programs and national renovation checklists. And that is a file that is currently going through the EU negotiation process here. So far, we're very optimistic on the mandate for automatic lighting controls. And also on a new concept that we introduced together with our partners from other technical building systems on indoor environmental quality. Because the argument we make is that you can be as energy efficient as you want, but fundamentally, buildings are for people. And what we need to be sure that is that inside the quality of the lighting, be it daylight or electrical lighting, of the air is good and that people are happy to continue living in these buildings. And I think that's probably one of the biggest tricks or one of the biggest challenges we have as an industry to keep going in our communication. Yes, we are the poster child for energy efficiency, but what makes us magical as an industry is the fact that we can create beauty. Light is about beauty and it's about appreciating your environment and enjoying the space we're in. And every one of us has an emotional attachment to lighting. Often, for the common mortal, it is something completely subconscious. We don't realize we lack light until somehow it becomes apparent. You know, me, I don't at all come from the lighting industry. And it's only when someone took me to application centers and showed me what amazing lighting looks like that I realized how terrible the lighting is in my daily life. But everybody fundamentally can remember that lighting helps them feel safe, helps them appreciate the beauty around them, like the Acropolis of my hometown lit up at night, thanks to the talents of this industry and this value chain. So that is what makes us special in an advocacy world. Otherwise, we're just as interesting as a fridge or a microwave. They're also energy efficient. But lighting is special. Lighting is an emotional attachment that everybody has. And that's a big part of the story, which can and should help us accelerate renovation rates, and which, for me, we should never forget. Lighting can do way more than just the energy savings. Two last things are supporting this drive of renovation, and that is the phase out of conventional technologies with the EU ROS substance restriction legislation banning certain mercury lamps, and also the EU ecodesign energy performance requirements. Most mercury lamps for general lighting are being phased out before the end of this year. It already started back in September 2021. And that's another reason to go out to the market and explain to them, do you know you have old lighting? We do different things now. Please, let's discuss on how to upgrade and get you to the next level. For those of you who are following that aspect, please note that the UK does have different deadlines compared to the EU following Brexit. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about, renovation. And now I'd like to take us down the path of sustainability, which is what has been keeping my team and myself super busy for the past 18 months, and is definitely one of the biggest topics we have right now here in Lighting Europe. The reason it's keeping us all busy is that basically we are experiencing an avalanche of legislations and of policies coming our way. The objective that we talked about on the EU Green Deal at the beginning is really being transposed also now into product-specific and company-specific obligations on sustainability. And these are being addressed as a concept. Sustainability is being addressed as a concept from many different sides. So you can't just go pick out one legislation that says sustainability, read it, and you're done. You have to look at a very wide list, a very wide perimeter of different policies and legislation to get the full picture. Now, I'll try to summarize that, and you will accept that for the benefits of today's presentation, I will not deep dive into each and every one of the things I will mention here now. Let's start off with rules around. There's rules coming out to regulate the sustainability of your products. So the ecodesign for sustainable products regulation that has been published mid last year and is now being negotiated basically extends ecodesign away from just energy related products and energy savings, and now also creates a whole new chapter on sustainability requirements for products. And I'll talk about what those are in a minute. If you are not in the scope of the ecodesign legislation, the new ecodesign legislation, then you will be caught up by the construction products legislation, which also creates sustainability requirements for anything that is considered a construction product. Those are obligations about how to design and how to market your product and what you need to be giving as information to customers. Then the EU has moved to the side of what rights do consumers have to expect in terms of sustainability from the products they purchase. And this is really information primarily for consumers, so it's really impacting the B2C market. But there is a legislative proposal out since I believe end of last year, empowering consumers on the green transition. So what kind of information can consumers expect to receive on the sustainability of products? Guarantees, longer guarantees for longer lifetimes. Yesterday, we saw the publication of a new piece of legislation on substantiating green claims, which basically completely restricts what kind of green claims you can make for marketing reasons only. You can use labels that have been created under law at EU level. So for example, the energy label in the EU, or a possible future repairability score that the EU might make. But if you start making claims about this is a green product, I'm environmentally friendly, then that needs to be substantiated and it needs to be certified by an independent third party before you can make it. So really trying to limit the amount of green claims that companies can use to market their products. We also saw yesterday the publication of the right to repair. So already in the product legislation, we have the obligation to make our product repairable. We also now have in the this new legislation of yesterday, we have a right for consumers to expect that products that are repairable actually are, that they get the information on time, that they get the right quote, that they can find the spare parts, that they can get it done in a at a fair price and in a reasonable amount of time. So the product obligations are being complemented by consumer rights to exercise these sustainability parameters. We have new rules on packaging and packaging waste, looking to reduce the amount of packaging and its environmental impact. We are legislating how companies monitor and communicate their sustainability as an organization, but also in terms of their products with the EU Green Taxonomy and the corporate sustainability reporting and due diligence obligations. We still have a lot of chemicals obligations on the ROS, REACH, and Mercury regulation. We have the review of the waste framework legislation and the WE directive about waste electrical electronic equipment that is also coming up for review. So you see, full circle, cradle to grave, different pieces of legislation looking to regulate sustainability of products and companies and commercial practices and across the entire life cycle, cradle to grave. Now, let's take a deep dive a bit more into this ecodesign for sustainable products regulation that is currently being negotiated. Ecodesign used to be about energy efficiency. It included some quality requirements, and in the recent legislation, ecodesign legislation on light sources and separate control gear, we also have obligations on removable and replaceable components in lighting. And you will find these and even stronger ones, especially as regards repairability, in other product groups again. In the future, and so also in the next generation of light source legislation that we expect to see being drafted as of 2025, you will find additional sustainability requirements on light sources and separate control gears and on any other product that gets regulated under the ESPR. And those are things like durability, lifetime, materials. How much recycled materials are you using? What substances are in your products? There is a proposal that we ask companies to track thousands of substances across the value chain globally and report on the substances of concern, as they are named, publicly to everybody down in their value chain. Repairability, we already have some requirements and we can expect them to become stronger. Other product groups have, for example, obligations to ensure that there are spare parts available for a minimum amount of time, to make information on repairability available to professional repairs. So those kinds of obligations can also occur. Recyclability of a product, that's partly about being able to dismantle it at end of life, making sure you don't include some substances in that product which might impede recycling, and of course then remanufacturing as well. So how can we harvest components? How can we make sure that there is information about those components, about the parts of the product that we are still going to use going on into this new second life? And how do we actually regulate the market of remanufactured products? Do they have to comply with all the obligations of a newly placed on the market product, something fresh out of the box, or do they have a special treatment? This is a list. What we are discussing today in Brussels is a list of possible requirements that might apply to lighting and to any other product regulated under this framework legislation. And then it is under specific product legislation that we will start discussing which parameters apply to the product, which sustainability obligations should we place on the product, and how do we do that. So the debate is still open in Lighting Europe. What we're trying to do is fix a framework that would allow for people that will give us a clear list of what can happen, and that will allow us to then really adopt this product-specific approach and allow companies to innovate. So, give me a target of X percentage needs to be recyclable, but then allow me to decide which components, which bits, how do I get there to make it happen. A bit more information now about what else you can expect with all this legislation. Product redesign. For sure, there will be something in the future coming up out of legislation from the EU, but definitely what you can expect is a lot more information to be made available, an obligation to tell the entire value chain, upstream, downstream, a lot more about what's in your product, how is it made, how does it perform in terms of sustainability, in terms of repairability, what kind of substances does it have in it. A lot of this we already have today. Today we have an energy label for lighting. We have the EPRL database where you're supposed to upload the information on the energy performance of your product. We have SKIP, which is the database of the EU where you're supposed to trace substances of very high concern and inform about the presence of those substances in components and articles. The new big proposal is the Digital Product Passport, the DPP. That's meant to be basically an obligation for each company, each manufacturer to make available through their own database, through their own websites, information around the various sustainability requirements of their product to be fixed again at product specific level, what information you would have to supply. And there would be, of course, an agreed model on how to make that information available in order that we can compare different products between themselves and to allow authorities to quickly scan and access the information they need when they're doing their job. And you can probably expect a few more labels or scores. So far, we only have an energy label, but we see discussions about, do we make a repairability label? Do we make a repairability score? How do we provide information, maybe a little extra label on some substances that might be in some components? So information obligations increasing over time, for sure. And they need to be made available to different people across the product's lifetime, not just the consumer, but the specifier, the recycler, the repairer, the remanufacturer. So making info available across the entire life cycle of a product. I mentioned earlier, we can expect also a lot more information obligations about the performance of a company in terms of its sustainability. We have the EU Green Taxonomy, which classifies what kind of operations are considered as sustainable, what kind of products are considered sustainable, and we have new rules coming out on corporate sustainability, reporting, and due diligence. What's interesting about these is that at the same time, you have obligations on financial institutions, banks, investors, to also target their financing towards sustainable activities and sustainable products. So now the investment market, the financial market, is checking this information because they also have obligations to allocate X percentage of their finances towards sustainability. So it's not being done for nothing. This kind of information drives investment moving forward here in Europe. Now, like I said, all rules are great, but you have to be able to navigate this environment. You have to be able to understand, enforce it, comply with it, apply it to your own products. Here's an overview of what we do in Lighting Europe to help with that. First of all, we try to educate our members about what's happening and to open up our minds about what's going to happen in the future, what is happening to other products, how are other sectors dealing with that. We have our Brussels Direct webinars. They are a series of bi-weekly normally webinars. Last year we did 24 in total. Basically, we invite someone from the European Commission or someone from another trade association to come and present latest developments, and we try to discuss and understand with them what does that mean for lighting and what does that mean for future regulatory trends. Most recently, just to give you an example and a flavor of what we do, we had the head of the recyclers, the European Recyclers Association, telling us what the big challenges are for them for the future in terms of investing in new recycling technologies, in terms of what kind of substance information they are looking for, so that together we can reach a good agreement about what rules to make on providing information on substances in products. And we also had a gentleman running the Batteries Association who was presenting the latest legislation they had. That was interesting for some lighting companies because they have batteries in their products, but it was also a very good demonstration of how sustainability obligations can be applied to product-specific legislation. So it was interesting just to give us a bit of insight into what might happen for lighting in 2025 when we discuss the next generation of eco-design rules. We try to support the market and authorities to comply with the new rules once they are published. So we draft guidelines that are available for free for our members, but otherwise accessible also on our website to the entire market. We draft them based on the expertise of our members. Ecodesign, for example, we spent 5 years negotiating with the European Commission and their consultants, so we have a good insight into that conversation. We have drafted our understanding of how those rules should be interpreted and applied, and they are reviewed. They have been reviewed by the European Commission and by market surveillance authorities, and wherever we have a difference of opinion, that is clearly stated. And if you ever see something wrong or something missing, feel free to get in touch because we happily update them as well to keep them a useful tool for everyone. We try to harmonize information across the market for all lighting companies, so there was an obligation to communicate about the replaceability of light sources and separate control gears in the recent eco-design legislation, and we made available for free pictograms that companies can use on their packaging to communicate that obligation. We also run trainings and live demonstrations so whenever there's a new requirement that nobody understands. I think my highlight last year was when we had new obligations to go through this verification process on the April database and to make sure that you are a legitimate company and legitimate supplier and that the information you're putting on the database is correct. It was very messy at the time and very difficult to understand who you had to contact and what you had to do. So we hosted the European Commission and their technical experts, and they ran us through the process, actually clicking through the actual form online to show people what needs to be done. And that live demo is available to view also on our website. And we also try to point the finger at what is going wrong and where we need to put resources. One of the big complaints that I personally have here in Brussels is that while we make all these rules on sustainability, it is still very much possible to buy non-compliant products online and no one's liable, which means it's legal. It's no one's fault. No one can be held to account for that. And we ran a mystery shopper exercise back in 2021, and we will be running one again this year, demonstrating how easy it is for online marketplaces to target and sell non-compliant products to people in Europe, and trying to get the regulators to change the rules and make that no longer possible. Last thing I want to leave you with is an insight into advocacy. I've explained to you how what legislation is coming out and how it can impact lighting. I think it's important to understand how we fit in here in Lighting Europe. So EU regulations are complex texts, and the process is also complex and time consuming. It takes about 2 years to decide on a final text. And then there are some that take very long time, some that can go quicker. A text comes out from the European Commission, but then it's the European Parliament, so people sitting elected directly by you and me from different countries and sitting here in Strasbourg or in Brussels down the street, and it's people from national ministries in the European Council which review the text, draft their own positions, and then those two bodies negotiate. So the final law of the EU that you and I will read is always a result of the European Commission having made a proposal and elected members of European Parliament and people from national governments having come along, reviewed it, and negotiated changes to it. And during all those steps, Lighting Europe and trade associations such as ours have stepped in to provide our technical expertise and to advocate for a better solution. So we are there when the Commission is drafting its text. We are there when the Parliament is thinking about what they should amend. We are there talking to national ministries when they're thinking about what they should amend. And we're also there when each body is negotiating and trying to push its own positions to say, okay, we think for this, the Parliament is good, for that, the Council is good. So there's many opportunities during this process to come in and try to be the voice of reason, try to be the voice of technical expertise and shape legislation that works, quite frankly. That's what we care about. What I want you to remember from all this is that the people who decide on EU rules are people that fundamentally you and I elect. So a small reminder that we have EU elections next year in 2024. And so Brussels is not that far away, and you and I can actually influence with our vote what happens and what is decided here. The final thought I want to leave you with is lighting is magical, lighting is beauty, and we are very sustainable, we are very energy efficient, and we can deliver to all these ambitious projects and ambitious visions. But let's never forget that the other thing we do and what really people love and care about is beautiful environments, feeling and experiencing beauty around us. That's what drew me to the lighting industry. That's what fascinates me still every day. And that's definitely part of my story whenever I meet someone here in Brussels. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rainier, for such an interesting presentations. We have now time to answer questions. So to our attendees, if you have any more questions, please send them through the Q&A box.
Thank you, Ourania. It was a very clear story and a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Allow me to share a question with you, coming in via a personal chat. So understand how they found me. I thought it was more a generic question for everyone. But I ask you, you started your presentations with the challenges and or opportunities for the lighting industry. And you mentioned sustainability and digital. How about health and well-being? Do you see that being part of sustainability, or should it be dealt with separately?
I think health and sustainability is certainly part of the story. I was in I was at an event last night in the European Parliament, a dinner event with people from the Commission, from the European Parliament, other trade associations, and we were discussing, in fact, we were trying to negotiate this sustainable products initiative. And there were two very interesting points, in my opinion, that were made, and they were not made by trade associations, which tends to be the norm. They were made by members of European Parliament. One was that sustainability has three pillars. It is social, it is environmental, but it is also economic. So all of these things go together. It cannot just be that we save the planet. We need to keep happy, healthy people and a thriving economy to deliver on sustainability.